Hello and welcome to episode 306 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham.
This week, teenagers in Palo Alto are addressing city council. You might think they're demanding the right to loiter in 7-Eleven parking lots while vaping, but no, they want city council to ban gas stoves. And while this is a laudable goal, never forget that the youth are here to replace us.
I got out my calculator and found that the province where Brian and I reside are wasting vast sums of taxpayer money on keeping coal going until 2050. Why, we could build 40 Canadian Football League stadiums with the savings, or approximately 4.5 NFL stadiums.
And I pull out my calculator and realize my Texas Instruments solar calculator from 40 years ago still works. Solar power is amazing.
All that and the lightning round, your letters and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
All right, so I have a new addition to my set here on the podcast, so anybody watching on video might be able to see it. I was in Fargo, North Dakota, not recently, very recently, and I bought this replica sign of the marquee for the Fargo Theater, and I'm just going to step out of the shot for a second, and then the camera will focus on the background so you can see it.
Brian has now left his chair. The chair is red and is spinning around. Kind of an interesting color for a chair. He's back in his chair now.
So briefly in focus there. So yes, they have this amazing Art Deco theater, which just turned 100. I don't know if I mentioned that last week.
I don't think you did.
Their theater was built in 1926. It turned 100 about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. Absolutely amazing. Art Deco wasn't really a thing in 1926 when it was built. So the actual current design sort of reflects the 1940s redesign that was done of the theater. But it's just spectacular. One of my favorite places
So is that going to be a regular addition to your set now?
Yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. I think that'll be nice.
Let me ask you this. Does it work in vertical video? Because most of our people watch us in vertical.
It will probably be chopped out in vertical video.
Completely
I can move it.
I'll put it on the Patreon page, people. I'll put it on the Patreon page. Free. You don't have to sign up. Just go to the Patreon page. It'll be there like our public social media will.
Yeah. Anyway, one other thing I wanted to talk about off the top, the city of Vancouver here in Canada, there's a new web app called Smell Van. And it's a web app where you could go and report smells that you hear, or that you smell around the city of Vancouver. So I know I was visiting there a couple of years ago, and you were telling me as I was there that there was some toxic air event at the time. Anyway, somebody created this web app, and you can go there, and if you smell something weird in Vancouver, you can report it, and there's sort of different categories there. So, the first thing is, how offensive do you find the smell? Mild, somewhat, extremely,
Okay.
How strong is the odor? What is the description? Is it a chemical smell? Is it a decaying animal smell? Does it smell like rotting eggs? Does it smell like sewage? And on and on and on.
Fishy.
And yeah, through this app, they can theoretically track what's going on in Vancouver. And they also ask things about, do you have the financial resources necessary to meet your needs? And the idea here being that, and this is voluntary, you don't have to fill that out if you don't want to, but, often it's the poorer populations that get subjected to bad smells. And so they're going to try and track that information.
All right. Well, we've got lots of new listeners to the show. So I will remind everyone who's listening, the new listeners especially, that I live close to an oil refinery.
Yeah.
And I will also say that we have a Clean Energy Show air quality project underway here where listeners have donated a high quality air quality monitor. But I'm finding that, and it's publicly available, the data is publicly available.
Yeah.
That's sort of citizen science type of thing, so you can, share that with people. Now, it's quite interesting how it doesn't seem to pick up much industrial pollution. Mostly the refinery apparently filters that out, so it's not showing up as particulate matter, which you can measure with the laser on that monitor.
Right.
But what I have is very useful is a relatively cheap on sale, $60 Canadian air quality monitor for indoor use that I've set up outdoors and protected it from the elements. Yeah. And it has a scale for volatile organic compounds. Those are nasty things which can cause cancer and which can cause neurological disorders and terrible things in people. And it doesn't tell me what VOCs are out there, but it gives me a total VOC count on an index between 1 and 100. And It's been very, very bad lately. So bad that I have a hard time talking about it. It's just frightening.
Yeah.
How bad it's been, and how calm weather, like without a wind, the refinery, and how it's there. Sometimes you can't smell it. Sometimes the refinery is overwhelming. Like I was telling you a couple of weeks ago that I drove by the refinery and came to a stoplight.
Yeah.
And I was overwhelmed by fumes in my car, and my eyes watered and my throat was sore for the rest of the night, and I could barely breathe. And there's a news story that was issued to the local press here that it's turnover time at the refinery. So every year they refurbish a certain amount of their equipment and turn it off. And then also they're switching to summer gas from winter gas, I assume, at some point. Yeah. And I don't know if that has something to do with it, but man, it has been so bad lately. I've not opened my window. We've had some spring weather here. I've kept my window sealed. And there's been times where I think I can smell it in the house. I don't know if it's psychological, but it doesn't register as a high count on my other air quality monitor indoors. But it does shut off my fan, it works very well to shut off my fan. And I can look back and see, corresponded to the wind conditions when it was high. And it's just, there's been nights where it's been red all across the board, where it's, my cutoff for turning off the fan is somewhere around 17. Well, it was up around 86. So it was really bad. And I don't know how far across the city of 250,000, or 200,000, whatever it is, in the actual city here, but it's got to hit a lot of people. And sometimes I also get a notification of the government air quality monitor, which I do think picks up this stuff, because the air quality drops sometimes when the wind is from the northeast. But the wind is very rarely from that direction where we live. And so it doesn't show up very often. So they probably don't have a lot of data. There's probably people getting sick. My daughter did a high school report on this, and she couldn't find any cancer data, really. So any, granular cancer data. So I may talk about that more on our bonus podcast coming up. And I found out yesterday that my sister-in-law in Calgary, got a lot of relatives there, bought a Prius plug-in hybrid without consulting me, just went out and bought one with her husband. Because they used to have a Prius, which I think they were influenced by ours, because they drove ours. We used to have a Prius. They bought a used one. It's around 2008. So repairs were coming costly on it. They decided to go buy a Prius. And the Priuses, we leased a couple of them for around $28,000 in our local currency here. And then after the pandemic, they shot up to like $42,000. Which I thought, the car was much better. It looks normal. It drives nice. It's got acceleration, but it's just a car, Yeah. The plug-in Prius version, now we've got a tax credit in Canada where if you buy a plug-in hybrid, that's cars that have a gas engine, but also have a battery that you can plug in and get, in this case, 75 kilometers of range, which is about 45 or 50 miles, I guess. So with that, it becomes cheaper than the regular Prius. And so the plug-in, to my surprise, is only a couple thousand or so, maybe 3,000 more than the regular Prius, which is just a hybrid, does not plug in. And so you'd be stupid, and I'd be very disappointed if they bought the regular Prius, because now you can get the plug-in one and get an electric car for at least part of your commute, depending on how long your commute is.
Yeah, as long as you have a place at home to plug it in, because it is one of those things where, it's got a small battery. So ideally you plug it in every night to get the most electric range. So, as long as you got a place to plug it in at home.
But with a battery of that size, you can plug it into a normal outlet and get it fully charged easily overnight. Probably, I don't know how many hours it would be, maybe 10 hours or so on good conditions. So they've got a garage and they can plug it in. And I was looking up electricity prices in the city that they live in, which is Calgary, one of our fourth or third biggest city now. It's only 8 cents a kilowatt hour. So electricity is measured for like 1,000 watts for an hour. Basically, that's the unit that they use. And ours is twice that, and ours is still pretty good. Ours is, our grid is falling apart, so they haven't raised it, but they need to do a lot of work on our grid. I'll get to that later. So I figured it out. It would be 80 to 90 cents to fill that battery every night for 75 kilometers range, because it doesn't drain completely. It's like 20% and then the engine kicks in or something, so it doesn't hurt the battery. But if you protracted that to your typical gas car, which has around 650 kilometers of range, that would only cost $8, maybe even $7 to fill up from empty. In there. So my notion is, why doesn't everyone in Calgary have an electric car? Because the savings are twice as good as some of the better jurisdictions around.
Yeah, they've tended to have lower gas prices in Calgary, in Alberta, because that's the home of oil and gas in Canada. So, slightly lower gas prices have probably kept people away. But 8 cents a kilowatt hour for power, that's Canadian. So that's only like 5 cents a kilowatt hour in US dollars.
Yeah.
That's super cheap.
It doesn't get cheaper. I think I looked up what the cheapest jurisdictions were in North America, and Manitoba, which has a lot of hydro. It's on the other side of where Brian and I live. The province of Quebec has a lot of hydro. It's pretty cheap, a lot of legacy hydro that's there. And yeah, it just makes sense. And, I think there's even in Calgary, they're going to have demand pricing. So you could even have less price overnight if you charged it overnight, because you can set a timer in your car to do that. Yeah, I thought it was more expensive. I thought their prices had gone up, but from what my research found, send us a letter. We've got people listening there if it's more than that.
There's some places, overnight power is as low as 1 cent a kilowatt hour, just depending on where you live. So, insanely cheap to charge in some places.
Well, I'm pleased to announce that the Big Bear Valley in California, the eagles there, they laid some eggs earlier in late January, and they got eaten. They might have not have been viable, but, they left the nest. Like, eagles have an instinct that the eggs are no good. They may have just taken off.
Yeah, so this is a webcam that you watch, right?
This is a webcam that everyone watches. Like, you can find news stories on this all over. There's a tourist industry there. I saw a news story on all the tourists that go there to try and see these eagles, because it is a resort community near Big Bear Lake. And I'm pleased to announce that on the weekend, that everything turned out. The eggs hatched right on Easter and the day before Easter. Usually it's windy. You can hear some birds in the background. But yeah, it's
right.
There they are. They're sitting on the nest. They will go get a fish, lay the fish on the nest, devour the fish. Little specks of fish go into the tiny little furry guy's mouth. And and it's much better. Last time one of the 3 chicks died because of a blizzard. Well, hopefully that doesn't happen now, but you never know because it is at a fairly high altitude.
All right, from Canary Media this week, James, the kids are all right. This story is from Palo Alto, California, and I always love it when young kids show up in politics and shame the adults into doing the right thing for the environment.
Yep. Same here.
So this story from Canary Media is about a group of students, but in a particular one grade 11 student in Palo Alto who went to city council and addressed them and presented the hair-raising facts about the health impacts of gas stoves and other appliances that burn fossil fuels. And we've covered this many times in the past on the show. Indoor air pollution is a very bad thing, and gas stoves create that. The Bay Area Air District has found that gas, water heaters, and furnaces cause premature deaths and create hundreds of millions of dollars in health costs in the region all year. A peer-reviewed meta-analysis found that children living in homes with gas stoves face up to a 42% increased risk of asthma. And according to the Public Law Health Center, cooking with gas releases similar pollutants to smoking cigarettes, including nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, particulate matter, and carcinogens like benzene and formaldehyde. And the student informed City Council in Palo Alto that the city has an obligation to alert residents to these dangers. If you listen to our podcast, you probably know about this. If you don't listen to our podcast, you probably don't. So this high school student is an intern with the Environmental and Public Health Task Force named Induction Rocks, a nod to the high-tech electric alternative to gas cooking, which is the induction cooktop, the most efficient way to cook. And Sven Thiessen, the co-founder of the EV think tank National Charging Access Coalition, and also a resident of Palo Alto, created the group last fall and co-leads it with another student who is a junior at Palo Alto High School, and in all, about a dozen middle and high school students in the Silicon Valley area. They volunteer for this group and they get paid $20 an hour as interns in the group, a wonderful opportunity for them. Palo Alto does have climate goals. They're not sitting around doing nothing. They do care about this. The city itself has a goal to reduce emissions 80% below 1990 levels by 2030, which, a reminder, that's only 4 years away.
Yeah.
So these are ambitious goals. Gas stoves make up a pretty small slice of carbon emissions, but among appliances, they're typically one of the biggest sources of indoor air pollution. And local governments often don't require them to vent to the outdoors. And I can attest to that fact because, as we've mentioned before, about 10 years ago, we renovated our kitchen and we hired a kitchen designer, a guy who specialized in designing kitchens. So we sort of let him kind of pick the appliances to go with the design. And he was really good at it, knew exactly what he was doing, but he picked a gas stove and I just didn't think about it at the time. And I thought, well, he's the designer. He knows what he's doing. This is what people like. But yes, we tried to vent it to the outdoors, but there was just something weird about the position of it in our house. There was just no easy way to get it up through the wall and out the roof. And since there was no legal requirement to vent it to the outdoors, we opted not to. And then, finally, 3 or 4 years ago, we just switched to an induction stove and we don't have to worry about that or worry about the indoor pollutants.
Does the induction stove have a noise that your kids can detect, your adult kids?
Yes, they sometimes have a slight vibration noise if you really crank it up to high. Right. I can hear it as well, but yeah, there's probably a high-pitched component that the youth can hear a little bit better than we do. So yeah, that the one downside is they occasionally make a little sort of rattling, buzzing noise. But induction cooktops are amazing. I can't recommend them enough.
Fast, efficient.
Fast and efficient. I guess 10 years ago when we put in the gas cooktop, induction wasn't as much of a thing back then. Right. So
the benefits weren't well known of induction. It was around, but we now know that induction is the way to go. We talked last week about India replacing cooking oil in their homes with induction, going right to an induction burner because it's the most efficient way to do things.
And it's a shame because, like I say, this guy was an amazing kitchen designer. Like, this was his specialty. Like, he designed kitchens.
But he's living in the past, Brian. He's living in the past.
But he's living in the past. And it always sucks because I do a lot of research on this kind of stuff, as you know, especially since the podcast. And it just seems like every time I defer to somebody else, defer to an expert.
Yeah.
It's kind of like... and then I do the research sometime later and realize, I shouldn't have trusted anyone. Don't trust anyone, Jay.
It's true. It is absolutely true. You can't expect a designer to know this stuff. You should.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to think that I'm a Renaissance man, a person of the world who likes to know a little bit about everything and maybe not too much about anything. But I certainly have learned a lot from this podcast. I've gotten into things that I never thought I would learn about or need to learn about. But I just also wanted to point out that some of those things from gas stoves is, you mentioned carcinogens, benzene, and formaldehyde. Well, some of those things come out of refineries. In fact, they log what they call fugitive emissions, and whenever things are bad, that means they escaped unexpectedly, but they have to log that. And it's just floating right over the city. They don't give a crap. You know what they do? Yeah. When I was talking for the book, the journalist writing the book, they said, well, there's a phone number you can phone to complain. Well, they know what's going out of their damn plant. Yeah. They know what's going into the air. They know the direction of the wind. They've got, windsocks up everywhere because it's a safety issue. They know what's going on. I don't need to tell them. They should be doing it themselves, and they're not. And Brian Stock, you and I are different financially. That's why the proceeds of our Patreon go to me. But I would like to move. There's no amount of Patreons that can help me move.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't live here if I had the choice. I wouldn't. I was aware of the refinery smelling because I had a high school friend up here where we live. And it was a lot worse, actually, in the 80s. I think they've, fixed that a lot now. But at the same time, now that I know what is in the air or the bad things are out there, I'm not even sure I'd live in this damn city, the whole city. Like, I would certainly live as far away from industry as I could.
Yeah, it's wild that they even built it anywhere near a city.
And speaking of crap, where we live, here's a story about the provincial government where we are. And we often talk about our own situation here because, one, we get very cold. And two, we have a love of oil and gas here, which you can see. I posted, you were mentioning the Engineering Student Society had I Love Oil and Gas pictures at the local university. Yeah. Well, I too walk there now. And I took a picture and posted it on our Patreon the other night. And it is quite remarkable. And it's, we got a letter about that in the show, which I kind of agree with. But anyway, there's a story again because they're going to refurbish a number of coal plants in one region of our province that generates a lot of electricity to keep them going until 2050, when the rest of the world will not be stinking, will not be emitting crap. If for technology and economics alone, that will be the case. But no, our backwards province thinks there's no way out with renewables. And so they are refurbishing these coal plants, and the cost just tripled.
Yeah.
Because they announced a certain cost, then there was the only way to save money was to have this cost, and it would save X amount of money. Now that cost has tripled to $2.6 billion for refurbishment. And they want to, the power utility here, which is a government crown, what we call a crown utility, wants to increase rates to support coal plant upgrades and grid modernization. The grid modernization, of course, is something they're way behind on. But Ryan, that's not the big cost. When I looked into this, it's actually the cost of coal, which is the big cost.
Yeah.
Coal ain't free, even when it comes from here. They keep saying how it's cheap. They don't call it beautiful or big and clean, but they call it economical. And it's $313 million Canadian per year to fuel the coal in our province. It's a small province, about 1.2 million people, by the way. And it does get cold here, so that's a factor in our switch to renewables, but it's not a deal breaker. And that increases, that $313 million just to fuel these coal plants increases about 5% a year. So if you're going to compare that to something like solar, which we learned last week lasts at least 30 years, perhaps even 35 years, and my comparison here is to take all that money, what would happen if you put that into solar and battery storage instead of coal? Yeah. How much would it cost? Well, I had to use AI for this to get the figures straight. So it's not a factual study that I'm presenting here. But if you compare the 30-year lifespan of solar, it works out to about $20.8 billion to put up that much solar power compared to, well, the figures I'm going to give you this. So it's $2.6 billion for coal plant refurbishment just to keep them running to 2050. 6 years before you would have to replace the solar if you put up solar. It's $23.5 billion for operating the coal during that time, because there is cost to just running the plant as well as the refurbishment. Yeah. And that's assuming there won't be a carbon or pollution levy from the federal government, which there is, and they're not paying, or they're claiming that they're not going to pay. Yeah. Because Canada, a long time ago, under a conservative government, said coal has to go away by 2030. That's the only, because it can go away. And next door in Alberta, it's mostly gone, I think, or completely gone ahead of schedule. And another $5 billion for sustaining this plant over 30 years, which is a rough estimate based on the total share of the grid that coal has now and the money for sustainment that they spend on the whole grid. If you took that share of coal, it would be $5 billion. So all told, it could be over $30 billion to run coal here until 2050. That's about $22 billion US dollars. Most of our listeners are in the United States. That's just the way it works. 30 billion Canadian could build as much as 24 gigawatts of solar in southern Saskatchewan, where that coal is. And that would be enough to exceed the province's current capacity by 3 times. So if you took that money and just built solar panels, this is a hypothetical, you just put that all into the current priced solar, that's today, not tomorrow, because it gets cheaper tomorrow and cheaper next year and the year after that, it would be 3 times, this is the peak, this is the middle of the day. This is sun. This is the peak of that solar, which is generally about 25% of the total output that it can make. But for that thought experiment, it would be 3 times the capacity with that much money, which is a lot.
Yeah.
To replace Saskatchewan's current coal generating capacity with a combination of solar and battery storage, which you would need to do. Batteries stretch that solar, they store it, and then they distribute that when the sun goes down, when people are still awake. The estimated total investment would be approximately $12.5 billion to $15.5 billion Canadian for 4 to 6 hour storage. Yeah, but that's in today's prices. Batteries are going way down. Solar prices are going down. Coal's going up. Yeah. Battery prices are going down fast. Coal is going up. Batteries and solar are both getting better. There's a trajectory of getting better. So, one solar panel can spit out more power than it used to, and it's going to be ever increasing. And batteries are really, now that we're buying a lot of them, are really going to improve, especially, we're talking about a quarter of a century here pretty much, to think that things aren't going to improve tremendously. And so coal here is 1.5 gigawatts on our power grid, and that's about as much as 2 smaller size conventional nuclear reactors. It would cost roughly as much to build solar and really long-term storage to cover that much coal. But it's at current prices with a vastly oversized system. So we have seasonality here because we're on the northern latitude. Like in December, the days are a bit shorter. They're quite a bit shorter. So you have less output of sun. They're also cloudier where we live. Yeah. So your output, they know that. They study that. They can tell you exactly what it'll be over the long term. But it might be 10 billion less, even with the batteries, it might be $10 billion less in the rough estimate than what coal is going to currently cost. That's not including savings. There's other savings, Brian, that they don't ever mention. The government never mentions.
Yeah.
So if you had a plant that you overbuilt, say you had to build it for December, the worst month, you would have to overbuild it and you would have a lot of extra solar. A lot of times you have extra solar anyway, because solar is great in spring and summer and it has a lot during the middle of the day and you have excess of it. Sometimes it gets wasted even. But what would happen, Brian, is that you would turn off your gas plants because there's a lot of gas plants around, right? There's other kinds of plants. But mostly we're talking about gas plants. Yeah. You turn them off. You don't pay for gas. So there's savings from that. So the savings in natural gas power generation from having solar in the daytime exceeding the coal capacity for most of the year, $9.3 billion in savings of gas. That's just natural gas plants, which they're opening another new one in Moose Jaw about an hour away from us. And that's the part they never tell you. They never tell you that part. The trends are all pointing to savings, and another savings would be selling excess solar to other jurisdictions via grid interconnection. So you have a lot of solar, sunny here in the next province or the next state. It's cloudy, you can sell that. So you make money off of that excess solar. So that's another savings. And this is just a simplified look. Also, we have a little bit of hydro here. I think it's, I don't know what it is, 10, 20% of our grid, something like that, 10, 15%. You turn off the hydro, the water builds up and it acts as a battery. Yeah. So you need to build less batteries and pay for less batteries because it turns on. Or maybe you use that for when the wind turbines supposedly don't work at minus 30 and below, which is occasionally happens here. So I'm not a grid expert and I had to rely on AI for most of this data. But I checked the sources and it was using the recent data that's available. And there's probably things that I'm forgetting. There's probably grid experts who would tell you that there's even more savings from doing that. And that's at current prices and it only gets cheaper. So it's frustrating.
Yeah. The striking part to me about what you just covered there was the cost of coal per year, $313 million just to buy coal every year. And you could build an insane amount of clean energy for $313 million. Just that figure alone is just
every 3 years, it's $1 billion and it's going up 5% a year. So look out.
Yeah. And as we know, the fuel costs for solar and wind are zero.
Zero.
There are other costs. It's not cheap. It's not free, but the fuel costs are zero and you don't have to worry about those fuel costs going up over time. I remember in the early days of the podcast, we had a sort of similar discussion like this. The other thing they built here many years ago was carbon capture and storage at one of these coal plants. And, they did manage to capture some of the carbon, maybe half of it, I think, was what they
typically it was
achieved.
Half. I think it's better now. They're reporting better now, only recently, which has been, how long has it been?
Yeah, several years.
12, 13 years, a long time.
Yeah. But it cost them, if I recall correctly, $1.5 billion to do this carbon capture. And I remember at the time, 5 or 6 years ago on the podcast, kind of running the numbers then. I wonder how many solar panels you could buy for $1.5 billion. Well, guess what? All these 5 or 6 years later, those solar panels are now way cheaper than they used to be. Those prices just keep going down.
Yeah, and that would probably be $2 billion now, I bet. And they were hoping to sell that technology because they were one of the world's first to do this on a large scale.
Yeah.
And no, it has not worked out. It has not worked out. It's been problematic and breaking down. And it's putting lipstick on a pig. It's really just, you don't need to burn coal.
Yeah.
I know people are fighting for their jobs, their coal jobs, but the planet is more important. I'm sorry. You can transition to something else.
Yeah. The math just doesn't add up. When you're spending $313 million a year on coal, when you're spending $1.5 million to mitigate the emissions, no, you just take that money and put it into solar. As we've reported recently, the amount of renewables added to the grid in 2025 was 692 gigawatts of renewables. That's 85% of all deployments in energy last year were renewables, which added up to 692 gigawatts. So there is still some fossil fuel generation being built, but 85% is now renewables worldwide. And, that means renewables have already won. Like, it just makes no sense to bet on this ancient technology. So as an addendum to your story, I started to think about colder countries, because that's often cited as one of the excuses for not doing clean energies. Oh, we live in a cold place. We're kind of far north. This stuff doesn't work. So I just Googled for clean energy projects in Finland, which is farther north than we are. It's sort of as far north as like the Yukon is in Canada, but most of the population of Canada is further south than Finland. So I just Googled that and came up with this story from Renewable Energy Magazine from June of 2025 about this project in Simo, Lapland. And it's 100 kilometers below the Arctic Circle. So this is far north. This is, an area we have talked about before on the podcast.
This is basically from Santa Claus, basically. You're getting up there.
Yes. In Finland, Lapland is known as the home of Santa Claus. And
I don't know. That's I take issue with that.
Yeah. But anyway, this story from last year tells us that they're putting up 120,000 solar panels in Lapland near the Arctic Circle. This demonstrates the viability. It can be done in a cold, dark northern place. It's going to be connected to existing wind turbines that are also in the same area. There are inverters from this company called SunGrow, and they have these solar inverters, which you need to hook up to the panels to, then put the power into the grid or into the batteries. So this company SunGrow has inverters that are performance tested in cold, wet, and other demanding conditions. They are IP66 and C5 rated for anti-corrosion protection. They have air cooling designs. They have weather protected designs. They're going to remain stable in freezing temperatures, in ice, excess moisture, all of these things. They still work. They install them directly under the PV module structures, and they function even when, those enclosures are basically frozen. Like, it's minimal disruption, high reliability, even though this is 100 kilometers from the Arctic Circle. There was also a 60 megawatt hour battery storage system that was deployed in the same place. A cost roughly 120,000 solar panels. This might cost $100 million, so something like that. It's not cheap, but when you're spending $313 million a year on coal, well, you could do 3 of these projects per year. That's like 360,000 solar panels a year could be deployed with those kind of figures.
That's amazing. And I know some people are new to the show. Let's remind people that you and I both have solar in our house, and we live in a cold climate. It gets colder than a lot of places, including much of the population of Finland. But our inverter is in our house. We just have one big inverter to change it to our normal household electricity from DC to AC. But one way of doing solar panels is having the inverter right on the panels. There's a name for that. I can't recall it. It goes back to the... I haven't thought about this stuff for about 10 years or 20 years even. But that's what goes on. And you will have less electricity from those panels than you will at other parts of the world, even if it's completely sunny, just because the days are shorter. Yeah. And the sun is, going through a lot of atmosphere at a low angle in the wintertime.
Yeah. But there are no dummies up there in Finland. They wouldn't be deploying
they're not, apparently
120,000 solar panels if it wasn't going to work. You can do the math on these things. How much you're going to get from the sun.
This has been computer modeled to death. They know what the climate is. They know what the angle of the sun is. They know how many hours will be cloud or thin clouds or rain. They have all that data. And by the way, if you're also doing the show, solar panels work better in cold weather than they do in warm weather, because once you hit the panel temperature of 25 degrees Celsius, it starts to lose efficiency. So the output of it starts to go down about 1% per degree Celsius, or roughly 0.5% for degree Fahrenheit.
Yeah. So cooler temperatures are better for solar panels.
Wow. And, I did a comparison between us and the Netherlands because latitudinally, we are about the same as the Netherlands. Yeah. And it is a tiny country. Yeah. We are... Well, I superimposed it on a TikTok video over Saskatchewan. It takes up a tiny portion of our vast place here. And even the furthest north you go, it gets way, way north. It's still good solar up there, better solar than a lot of the world, especially in the northern hemisphere. And we have great resources no matter where you are. But if you're down where these coal plants are being built on the south, that's even better. It's the best solar down there. And some of the best wind down there. And by the way, I didn't mention wind. If you mix in wind, you need less batteries and the cost goes down because wind goes more often. So you always have to mix in different things. I'm not just talking about solar batteries. In reality, you mix in other things.
Yeah, Estevan, where our coal plants are, is often cited as the sunniest place in Canada. Like, this is one of the slogans of their small city down there. It's one of the sunniest places in Canada.
Let's burn some coal and block out the sun if we can. We love it when you guys contact us. Our listeners can reach us anytime about anything. Drop us an email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. That's cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Our voicemail line, which you could do online, is speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. And, well, it's the first of the month, Brian, so we're going to shout out some of our supporters who give us $5 a month or more on our Patreon page. Here we go. Buckle in. Wes S., John Hayes, Glenn Wright, Timo Kellenberger, Weldon Penner, Andy Fessler.
The Clean Energy Show is made possible by listeners like you who support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/cleanenergypod. Please sign up there for as little as $1 a month, and you'll get perks like ad-free episodes, access to the Clean Energy Show Discord server, discounts at the merch store, early access for episodes, behind-the-scenes stuff, thank you credits on our video podcast, and verbal shoutouts on the audio podcast. Coming up next, it's the lightning round.
Time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
And by the way, we'll have some letters from our listeners after the lightning round this week. First off, Google is to tap into gas plant for AI data center and a sharp turn from its climate goal. Boo! Boo, Google. This Texas power plant would emit 4.5 million tons of carbon dioxide per year for an AI data center, more than that of the entire city of San Francisco. The United Kingdom is experiencing its earliest spring on record. Citizen science data reveals early flowering, nesting, and insect activity as global heating accelerates seasonal change. That's from The Guardian. Time for a CS Fast Fact. OPEC announced its OPEC output collapsed by 7.56 million barrels per day, or 25% in March. The output fell 5 million barrels per day in 1973's oil embargo oil crisis, and this is more than that, just FYI. Another one for you. China produces around 80% of its urea from coal, rather than, as most other nations do, natural gas, which is not good. The method, though, is insulating Beijing from rising nitrogen fertilizer prices. Brian, urea, not something I really was familiar with before this current oil crisis. It goes through the Strait of Hormuz. It is used in fertilizer.
Yeah.
I think it was as something related to urine, but it's different, I guess.
I hope.
Kia's EV2 orders are open in Europe, and the subcompact SUV is starting at just $30,500. That price came in lower than expected. Scientists develop a gene-edited wheat that can make toasted bread less carcinogenic. Boy, this got my attention because I had toasted bread for breakfast every day right now.
Yeah.
That's going to change in the future because of an operation I'm about to undergo. Bread and biscuits made from CRISPR-edited wheat showed sustainably reduced acrylamide levels. And I'm thinking, geez, better not burn my bread.
Yeah.
I've got a great toaster. Great toaster. Mm-hmm. Love my toaster. Mm-hmm. But it's not good. It doesn't toast evenly. My rotten son went to a used store and got himself a really high-end toaster. you know the ones like you have. It lifts by itself. Toasts beautifully evenly. I told him to put it in his will. It's the only thing of value that I want from him. He's going to Europe. Who knows what can happen over there? Maybe he won't come home because there's no gas for the planes or oil, jet fuel. Anyway, I'm a big, it doesn't matter anymore. I can't eat toast in the future. I don't think. We'll see how it goes. Sales of full electric autos in New Zealand surged 278% during March 2026 compared to March 2025.
Wow.
That's insane. That's, we talk about maybe 29% is huge. But we're talking about 278% rise. I don't know if there was a great, if the Chinese just, set up shop and maybe there's some incentives. I don't know. Full electric autos were also 16.5% of auto sales right now, and plug-in hybrids were about another 8%. So 25% of autos sold in New Zealand during March had a plug, which is a lot better than North America.
Yeah, a lot of places moving faster than North America, and 25% is not bad at all.
Time for the tweet of the week. This is from Jan Rosenau. Lebanon is one of the most surprising clean energy stories in the world. Didn't know this. Solar went from less than 1% of electricity in 2020 to nearly 30% of their grid in 2024.
In 4 years.
That's 2 years ago.
Wow.
That's 2 years ago. We talk about how easy it is to deploy this stuff relative to other things like nuclear.
Yeah.
Certainly hydro. Hydro is a ridiculous process. And it's not because of policy, Brian. It's because the state grid collapsed and people installed rooftop solar out of sheer necessity, just like Pakistan.
Yeah.
And Pakistan has huge levels of their share of the grid of solar now. It's so easy that people can install it themselves. You can't do that in a lot of Western countries without lots of permits and professionals doing it, but some solar can, be easily put up in some regions of the world. Tesla converts a former gas station into a supercharger station in South Korea.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned that because I think we're going to keep seeing stories like it. We've seen Norway doing that.
Yeah.
But this is something that we're going to see in the future.
No, and I see there's a new gas station going up in our city not far from me. And I keep thinking to myself, every time I see a new gas station constructed, I think that's got to be the last one. We don't need to expand this gas infrastructure anymore.
There was one put up by a First Nation near my house, and it took at least 5 years. I don't know exactly, but it took at least 5 years to get it going.
Wow.
And I thought, if you don't hurry up, it's going to be obsolete. Like I generally felt that as I drove by in my electric cars. For the first time ever, Gas Buddy data. By the way, Gas Buddy was invented in our city where Brian and I live, Regina, Canada.
Yeah, and it's an app or website that tracks gas prices.
They're not based here anymore, but I met somebody who worked for them once. The data showing that the average deal prices have risen above $8 per gallon in San Francisco. 2 mentions of San Francisco this week. California. The first ever U.S. city to reach the $8 mark ever.
Wow.
So bad.
Yeah, diesel has been higher than gas these days.
Globally, petrol prices are up 14%. In Southeast Asia, though, it's 42%.
Yeah.
Pretty significant.
Yeah, we talked a lot about Southeast Asia really struggling with their oil and gas supply at the moment.
Tesla plans to expand in Japan to at least 60 stores as it seeks to become the country's biggest imported car brand by as early as next year. Supercharging network in the world, by the way, Brian, that's the Tesla supercharging network that they have for fast-charging cars, reached a milestone of 80,000 stalls deployed globally since 2012.
Wow.
Boy, that time has gone by fast. I remember when they were first starting to put up superchargers, and now here we are. A few mornings ago on the weekend, SPP East. What is that? That is the name of the grid that is below you and I, Brian. If we go a couple hours south across the United States border, we enter a grid called SPP East. And it's not that different than us, 2 hours of a drive. And that's, 50% wind and 34% gas and coal.
Yeah.
So it's already, the whole grid there is 50% wind. And we say, we can't do that here.
Yeah.
We can't, our portion of wind, a million years from now, or when our grandchildren are getting their first job, will be around 5% or 6 or 8% or 10%. Yeah. It's not a lot compared to what it already is just south of our border 2 hours away.
Yeah. And their climate is basically the same as ours.
And finally, in the lightning round this week, the number of 80-degree Fahrenheit plus days in March in Denver from 1972 to 2025 was only 7 days. But in March this year, 8 days. So climate change. And a lot of the snow has melted in a lot of places in the western United States where they didn't expect it to melt. It's not universally true, but there is a lot of places where the snow pack is already gone. Hey, why don't we jump into the mailbag, Brian?
All right, this letter says, "Hi, Brian and James. Oh, what to do when we've listened to the weekly Clean Energy Show, which we look forward to every week. We live in Michigan, near Port Huron, a border city with Sarnia, Ontario. We listen to both NPR Radio and Canada's CBC Radio 1 daily, but what about the climate? We found on CBC Radio 1 Sundays, 11 a.m. Eastern, Laura Lynch's What on Earth show about climate. It's also a CBC podcast, so we can listen anytime like we do with our favorite show, you know the one. You've probably given a shout out to CBC's What on Earth before, but with climate education being more important than ever, I thought I'd recommend this program to your listeners. By the way, you both provide the best education out there. Aw, thanks. I just commented on your Patreon page to a photo James posted of your local college's Engineering Student Society bulletin board. Someone tacked a bumper sticker on it that reads, "I love Canadian oil and gas." We need a bumper sticker that reads, "We love clean, green energy." Then in smaller print, listen to the Clean Energy Show podcast to learn more. It was mentioned on the latest...
I've thought about it. That would be vandalism, but I thought about it. I've thought about that exact thing.
No, I was thinking about adding something to that engineering wall myself as well. It was mentioned on the latest One on Earth show, does a military upgrade mean a climate downgrade? That a Canadian company designed and is building an electric motorcycle for the Canadian military to be used in the northern Arctic and can withstand extreme cold. Maybe you can research this for next week's show. Once again, it would show that EVs do work in cold climates too. Thank you guys. Keep up the great work, Denny and Linda.
Thank you for that letter. I used to listen to a little bit of What on Earth. I don't so much anymore. I tend to listen to things where I need to learn things for our show and understand things better, very technical things, but occasionally I will find something of interest there. I will note that there is a motorcycle company which has been discussed in the blogs a lot that is coming up with their so-called donut battery, which charges very fast and works in cold weather. Also, China has some battery technology. I think they're actually putting sodium ion into motorcycles and scooters, which will work very well in the cold as well. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening, and I can see the military using snowmobiles, or what do they call them? What's the universal name for them?
Yeah, I think snowmobiles. And that's what I was going to mention, because there was a story recently. I didn't have time to talk about it, but there's a Canadian snowmobile company called Taiga.
Yeah.
And they've now integrated vehicle to grid on their snowmobiles. So you can use your electric snowmobile as a backup battery for your house.
Because you're not using it every day. You're not using it every day.
I don't think so, no.
Not in the summer, assuming you have a summer. So yeah, that's a good idea. You can make use of that. And they're doing that with RVs too, because they know that the RVs are parked most of the time. You can use it as a vehicle. Instead of installing a battery to your home to store solar and distribute it and save you money during peak hours, then they do that. So yeah, there's lots of stories going on. And that electric snowmobile company, and I think they also make the water scooter, what do you call them?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, jet ski.
Jet skis. And they're a lot quieter. I know Electric sort of did a test on both of them and really enjoying them because you get 100% of the torque and they're a lot quieter. And if you're snowmobiling, you don't want a lot of noise. There's no excuse for noise when you're snowmobiling. You want nature. You want to hook up with nature. So
I complained about this a few years ago on the podcast. We went out to our cottage one winter and we were walking across the frozen lake on this beautiful, pristine, quiet, nature-filled day. And all these snowmobiles just buzzed past us. And it wasn't just the noise. Then
it was the pollution.
We got the exhaust fumes wafting into our faces. It was unfortunate.
That's not nature at all. I got another one here. Bob says, "Hi, gang. I listened to this today, and I think we may have finally got a climate action champion as a federal political leader in Canada. I think you'll find a lot more detail about his vision for a cleaner, greener Canada. I think you'll like it. I'm one of his fans, and as I say, I voted for Naomi Klein's husband. This is a front burner story that he has. We have three major federal political parties, and the third one sort of got annihilated in the last election because of the threats from Trump to our sovereignty here, and we sort of backed one guy on the Liberal Party. However, they're still struggling, so they just elected a new leader, and Bob says that good on climate. It's questionable about the other guy on the right. And then the one on the right of center, they don't seem to take it seriously at all. They don't have solutions.
Yes, and he's married to Naomi Klein, who is a famous Canadian author of progressive books.
And also, I just want to mention that Eric sent us a video of a very busy supercharger in California over the long weekend. He says that he's usually there by himself, but there was a huge lineup at this one. You can check out that video on our Patreon page, patreon.com/cleanenergypod. That is a public post. You don't have to sign up for anything. Just go there and look at it. And thanks for sending that in. That's kind of cool when people send in videos. We get a taste of what's going on in the world.
Yes, electric car chargers are getting busier. I can testify to that from my own experience. But actually, the one that's annoying me most is hotel chargers are getting busier. So if I'm driving somewhere on a road trip, I'd love to find a hotel that's got an electric car charger. But around here, they often only have one or two of them. And the last couple of times I've been disappointed by arriving a bit too late and somebody else has snagged that charger.
Yeah, I got to go up for my son's graduation and I'm looking for hotels as we speak. And I'm thinking, well, do I even worry about it or do I get one near a supercharger?
Yeah.
Do I just get a hotel that's I can walk like half a block and just park the car there and know that I'm going to get that charge? But yeah, that is something they should do because they'll bring in customers and you can charge people for it. You don't have to give it away.
Yep.
People will happily pay for level 2 charging of a few bucks for overnight charge so they can wake up and get going with a full charge. It's a big deal, and people should do a better job with that.
Yeah, I was in Brandon recently, and their Holiday Inn there, they charge now $10 to use the electric charger, but there was a Ford F-150 Lightning that had snagged it before me.
Bastard. How dare he?
All right, that's it for this week. You can find us on social media at Clean Energy Pod. That email, once again, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And as always, remember to hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Join our Patreon if you can. Support us. We would really appreciate it. It helps the podcast a tremendous amount. Even small amounts go a long way. And thank you to our Patreon Clean Club executive members, Green Bastard, Brett Routley, and Tiernan. And thank you all for supporting our podcast. Up next, I guess, is going to be our monthly bonus podcast, Brian. And one of the conversations that I'm planning to be talking about is the New York Times interview with this Beijing bureau chief, which we've talked about once before in the show, but there's a new interview where he's there again explaining how China is dominating manufacturing. I'm going to play you a clip here. This is not the best clip, but it is just a taste of what we'll be talking about.
Pretty much anything can be made less expensively in China than anywhere else. They're not just the least expensive place to make clothing or furniture. Now they're the least expensive place to make cars, batteries, all these other technologies. And a big part of that is because they're making them in very advanced factories with more robots than anyone else in the world.
Join us on our Patreon to hear that full bonus podcast coming up later this week. We'll see you again in 7 days.
See you next week.